So I am a transgender woman. So let's define some terms right from the bat. Trans woman. So I was assigned male at birth. My gender identity has always been female. And so I am a transgender woman. So you understand the trans, so there's trans men, there's trans women. Trans man is someone who is assigned female at birth and has gone through the process of transitioning and is living their life in accordance with their male gender identity. Trans woman, someone who is assigned male at birth but has gone through the process or is living their life as their gender identity as female. So I've used two other terms there: assigned at birth, male or female, and gender identity. So why do I say I was assigned male at birth as opposed to saying I was biologically male? Because in essence, I was. I mean, as Lynn said in her introduction, I am still legally married. I am the father of 3 great kids, and we celebrated Father's Day on Sunday. They call me Dad, often in public, which raises a lot of eyebrows. But so why do I not use the term biological male? Because what medicine, what science is discovering is that that gender identity, that we'll get to that, but gender identity is probably genetic. There's a wonderful book called The Gene by Dr. Siddhartha Mukherjee. And you may recognize Dr. Mukherjee from a previous book that he did called, it's The Biography of Cancer, The Emperor of All Maladies, The Biography of Cancer. And it was made into a PBS documentary. It's an amazing book, The Gene, and it's a study of the genome. And Dr. Mukherjee has a chapter on sexual orientation and gender identity, in which he talks about the genetic component to gender identity. And so because genes are part of our biology, it's no longer appropriate to say biological sex, because part of me, for whatever reason, some gene turned on that wasn't supposed to, something turned off that wasn't supposed to, whatever happened, and this is the way I have been since birth. It's important to understand that no one chooses their gender identity. So what is gender identity? Gender identity is that deeply held sense of self, who you are, male, female, or something else. And it's not your sexual orientation. Don't conflate those two. Sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Gender identity, as I said, is that deeply held sense of who you are. So an easy shorthand version that I tell people to remember the difference between the two is that sexual orientation is who you want to go to bed with. Gender identity is who you want to go to bed as. Right? So, some people say, oh, well, you must have been a gay man, and this is your way of trying to, take care of it. No. Gender identity, sexual orientation, totally different things. Most people understand sexual orientation because you all have one. Gay, straight, bi, whatever. You all know that you have a sexual orientation. At some point in your life, you said, oh, that guy's cute, or whoa, look at that girl. And you didn't ask to feel that way. It just happened. Somewhere around puberty for most of you, it's suddenly you notice men, you notice women, you notice both, didn't matter, but you found someone sexually attractive and you didn't pick it. It just happened to you. The same is true for gender identity. People don't pick their gender identity. I didn't pick to be trans. It just happened. The reason, as I said, why most people get sexual orientation is because you all have one, you all think about it, you know who you're attracted to. The reason why most people don't get the concept of gender identity is because for 99% of the population, your gender identity, that deeply held sense of who you are, and your anatomy match. And so you never think of it. It just, you're a whole package. And so you don't think of gender identity as a separate concept. If I said to you, what makes you a man or a woman, I suspect most of you would default to, well, I have a penis, I have a vagina. You would default to your anatomy. If I said, take anatomy out of the equation, you can't, what makes you a man or a woman, but leave your anatomy aside, you'd probably give me some sexual stereotypes. Well, I like fashion, I'm into sports, I like cars. And I could give you just as many examples of women who are into sports or cars or men who are into fashion than you could give. And so they're just stereotypes. And finally, I think you'd say, I don't know, I just am. That's your gender identity. Hold on to that. The I don't know what makes me a man or a woman, I just am, is your gender identity. Now, you don't think about it if you're cisgender being your anatomy and your gender identity match, because everything matches. Why would you think about it? But for about 0.5% of the population, our gender identity and our anatomy do not match. And that is somebody who is transgender. And as I said, it's really hard to estimate because there's so many trans people in the closet that don't come out. There's a lot of trans people that don't go through the process. There's a lot of trans people who have gone through the process and don't want anyone to know that they've been through the process. So getting accurate statistics on the number of trans people is hard, but the common estimates are somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. But think about that. I mean, there's 300 million people in the United States. You take 1% of that, you have 3 million trans people in the United States. So, it's not, I'm not alone in standing here talking about these issues. It impacts a lot of people. And one of the questions that I often get is, okay, if you were born that way, and since I've had my first conscious memories of 3 or 4 years old, feeling like I should be a girl instead of a boy, why did you live your life the way that you did? As you can see, I was born in 1952. I didn't have the year there, but kind of by the cars, the football helmet, some of those things are kind of dead giveaways of how old I am. And so I was born in 1952. I thought I was the only person in the world who felt like I did. There was no internet, there was no, blogs, there was no anything. And it was probably not until I was about 11 or 12 that I read an article about some trans women who had gone through the gender confirmation process. Back then they were called transsexuals. And I read about that and I was like, whoa, there's other people like me. But that was the first time I realized it. And I will tell you, growing up when I did, you didn't talk about those things. You wanted to fit in. You wanted to be loved. You wanted to have friends. You wanted your family to accept you. So in my case, I conformed myself to the way people saw me, the way people expected me to act, as opposed to how I felt. And I lived my life accordingly. And as I said, I've had a blessed life. I am not here complaining. I grew up, I went to an all-boys high school. Again, you never talked about those things because back in the late 60s when I went to high school, if they thought you were gay, your life was living hell. The thought that somebody might be trans, I mean, it was not something that was ever even discussed other than in a mocking way. So I went to high school, got to go to college, law school, And one of the things that I always say in reference to my college is, now looking back, I can see how much I am a product of heterosexual white male privilege. And I say that without being self-deprecating and without putting down any of the heterosexual white men in the room, but I am the product of that privilege because I have an older sister. I have two older sisters, but one in particular who's much smarter than me. Like my dad, she should have been an engineer because she just has a brilliant mathematical mind. She was doing computers when you were still doing DOS. And she wanted to go away to college. And my dad, being a product of a different time, a different era, wouldn't let her go. She had to go to the local college. 7 years later, when it was my turn, I could go wherever I wanted. When I came home from college one year and said to my dad, I think I want to go to law school, it was like, absolutely, you can go to law school. Never an obstacle put in my path. And yet those same obstacles, by the same loving dad who loved my sister as much as he loved me, there were obstacles in her path. And the only difference between us was that she was born female and I was born by all outward appearances as male. And so I had those benefits, I had those privileges. I went to law school when I graduated law school in 1977. In fact, I went to Villanova and worked in the city my second and third year for the disciplinary board of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. So when I graduated, again, I had the benefits of being a heterosexual white male. I didn't face the same challenges that women that I went to law school with faced when they came out of law school. And I mean, for those of us of a certain age, we know what those challenges were for those women and still are for women lawyers, women in the workplace in general, women in the professions. It's harder. And anybody who tells you it's not is lying or naive. It's harder. It wasn't harder for me because I didn't have to experience it, but I saw it. And I saw it firsthand to people that I knew and really respected. And to the women of my generation who succeeded beyond, where I am, etc., I have the greatest respect and admiration because they had to overcome so much more than I did. So I went to law school, I got a job, I started practicing law, I do litigation, and we'll kind of jump forward, and Lynn, you just, if at any point in time we're running into time issues, just let me know. I was with the same firm for almost 30 years, and doing litigation, and we were a mid-sized firm. The highest we got was 19 lawyers. And in 2006, I was selected by my partners to be the managing partner of the law firm. And so I've answered the question that's often asked about why did you live the life you did? I mean, I met a woman, I fell in love, we had kids. It was a wonderful life. They should make a movie out of that. And then the next question is always, well, why did you do it when you did? You can't hear? Oh, I'm sorry. Having trouble hearing, and I don't know if that's me facing that way or just the... So I'll try to, I don't know. Maybe I can move it up a little. Any better? If it's not, tell me, because I don't want to only speak to half the room. So please, if I fade out again, just give me a high five. I'll try to look that way every once in a while. Make sure you're not giving me a high five. So the question that I'm asked, and I probably faded out of the camera range now, and logistics. The question I'm asked is why, what caused you to get to the point where you couldn't do it anymore? And that's not an easy question to answer, not because it's personally hard or gut-wrenching, it's because I don't really have a good answer for it. Because at some point, in time carrying this, I mean, secret isn't the right word, but it was a secret to everybody in the world but one. But carrying this through my life and knowing that I was not the person who I felt I should be, that I knew who I was, it wears on you, and it grinds on you, and it wears you out. And despite the fact that I loved my family and still love my family, and despite the fact that I loved my job and didn't want to hurt anyone, I got to the point in my life where I would rather be dead than continue to live that lie. Why that point came in 2007 as opposed to 1997 or 2017, I can't tell you. It just came. The analogy I give is if you drip water on a rock, the water is going to hit the rock and just run right off. But if you drip water on a rock every second of every day, for every week, for every month, for years, eventually that rock is going to start to wear away. And if you do it long enough, that rock is going to crack. And that's what happened to me. At some point, I just could not live the way I was any longer. And I became depressed, suicidal, and again, there was only one person in the world that ever saw that part of me, at least initially. And I had become the managing partner in 2006. In 2007, I went into therapy because I was having such a tough time. And I think what finally crystallized everything for me is a conversation that I had with my oldest son, and I'll censor it because I know this is going to be shared. My oldest son and I, as I am with all my kids, we're very close. And at one point, he said to me, if you don't effing know that we know that you're effing miserable and you're making us effing miserable, you're out of your effing mind. And he had never dropped an F-bomb to me, had never spoken to me like that in his life, but he was telling me that the very people that I thought I was protecting by not doing what I felt I needed to do, I was hurting. And I realized that all my life I've preached to my kids about being honest and being true to yourself and doing whatever you wanted to do in life, and here I was not setting a very good example because I was not being true to myself, I was not being honest with them, I was not being honest with myself. And so as a result of being in therapy, I was in therapy for 2 years before I started down this road, because at some point I realized that the only way that I could live a happy, productive life and make my kids happy and productive adults was to be true to myself. I can tell you that it was a very interesting experience being the managing partner of a law firm. You're all involved in the practice of law, so I was the managing partner. I was also the transitioning employee. So I got to fill all the different roles all at once. And I sat down with my then 4 other equity partners about a year before I went through this process, actually more than a year before I went through this process, and came out to them. Needless to say, that was a very interesting conversation for middle-aged white men, and having one of their partners tell them, guess what, I'm trans. You're going to make me hold the mic. Oh, God.
I'm talking over the plate mic. I'm sorry.
Okay, as you can tell, I don't like mics, but I apologize to the people in the back who missed part of it. So I was the transitioning employee, so I sat down with my partners, And as you might imagine, they were all pretty dumbstruck. One of my partners said to me, I don't know anybody who's transgender. And I said, of course you do. You know me. You've known me for over 20 years. You just didn't know something about me. Nothing about me has changed. The only thing that's changed is what you know about me. And so for someone who's transgender and is going to go through the gender confirmation process, it's not, again, some people will move away, go to a different location, etc. I was a lawyer. I'm admitted in New Jersey. I'm not admitted anywhere else. I was a partner in a law firm. I had a good income. I wasn't going to uproot myself, jeopardize my family's economic wherewithal. And so obviously I was making the decision to transition in place. I was going to remain at the firm where I was doing the exact same kind of work that I did. And so that required me not only to come out to my partners, but then to come out to clients, judges, adversaries. And I will say that I don't know what anyone said to me behind my back, but to my face, everyone was kind, understanding, and there's actually a lawyer in Philadelphia who I don't know if he's still practicing because this was almost 10 years ago, who was with the Philadelphia office of McCarter and English. When I left to go have some surgery, Mike wrote me a letter. And we were in the midst of a knockdown, drag-out, dirty piece of litigation where we were adversaries and fighting every day on something. And he wrote me the nicest, kindest letter. A letter, not email, a real letter, the old-fashioned kind, handwritten on his personal stationery. And it, as you can tell, to this day, that meant so much to me. But what meant as much, if not more, is that when I came back, Mike and I took up right where we left off as adversaries who were going at each other, trying to win a case, and nothing had changed. And that was the important thing, that nothing had changed. I will tell you that although it went well with judges and adversaries and my existing clients, that it did have an impact on my business, on my firm, in the sense that at that point in time in my career, what I was doing a lot of was plaintiff's employment work. And for that type of work, you get a lot of referrals. And so I had 3 law firms primarily that would refer all of their plaintiff's employment work to me. And I was obviously in a good situation where I could pick and choose the cases I wanted to take because I had 3 pretty reliable referral sources. After I went through the gender confirmation process, all 3 of those firms stopped referring me work. And so, as you can imagine, that had a very detrimental impact on my practice, on my firm, in terms of the income for the firm, my own personal income. And that was very hard because I knew the people that referred the work to me on a personal basis. We had done a lot of things together. That's why they were referral sources. They knew me well. I knew them well. And it was a very difficult thing to deal with. We got through it. My firm ultimately broke up 3 years ago in 2015. I wouldn't say that my transition had nothing to do with it, but I don't think it was the cause. I mean, the cause was that I had older partners, 2 of whom decided to retire, 1 of whom decided to take an offer with another firm. And so as a result, we did not have good succession planning. So for all of you who are in smaller firms as opposed to bigger firms, do your succession planning. Make sure the lawyers in your firm do that. And as a result, we closed the firm in September of 2015. I then moved to Gluck Walrath, and everybody there knows my past. I mean, it's not a secret. And have restarted my career at Gluck Walrath and really enjoying the practice of law there, and doing, I hope, as good a job as I've ever done in terms of being a lawyer. So that's kind of my personal journey. If I could leave you with some things in terms of definitions, terminologies, and things like that, as I said, one of the most important things that I'd like you to understand is that not all transgender people are alike. I am just one transgender person. I don't speak for the community writ large. My 10-and-a-half-year-old client that I changed her name a year ago, who socially transitioned from, she was assigned male at birth, at the age of 5, she started living in accordance with her gender identity as a little girl. Her life as a transgender person is going to be entirely different from mine. I grew up, I was socialized as a male, I lived as a male in a male world. She'll never have that experience. She will have the experience of every other young girl, young woman of her generation. And so don't translate my life into what it is like for all transgender people. Also, as I've said, I've had a lot of benefits in my life. And for so many trans people, there are so many socioeconomic barriers that are in place that their lives are dramatically different than mine. A lot of trans people, when they come out, they lose their jobs, or maybe they can't get a job because they're trans. And not all trans people, fit into society in terms of the way society perceives them. So maybe, a trans woman who is 6'5", and looks like, she could play linebacker for the Eagles, she's still just as much a trans woman as I am. Again, one of the benefits that I've had in life is that I'm 5'5". This is my hair. For a lot of trans people, they don't have those benefits. And if you don't have the socioeconomic wherewithal to do all of the things that I have been able to do, your life is that much more difficult in terms of being a trans person. So keep those things in mind. It's also important to realize that not all trans people want to go through the gender confirmation process. You can be trans and live your life, in the sex that you were assigned at birth, and spend part of your life maybe, out as a woman or out as a man, but then go back to the normal role that society would expect you to fill based on the sex you were assigned at birth. Not everybody needs to go through this process. Not everybody wants to go through this process. Not everybody can go through this process. And it is a process. There's not one size fits all. Sometimes I'm asked the question about, well, what about the operation? And, what about, what type of surgery is necessary to be trans? None. No surgery required. Some people have surgery. Some people don't. And there's not one surgery. If you're a trans man, maybe you have a mastectomy, maybe you have a hysterectomy, maybe you have none of the above. If you're a trans woman, maybe you have facial surgery, maybe you have breast augmentation surgery, maybe you have gender confirming surgery, maybe you have none. There are all different things that can happen. Again, it depends on what a person wants, what a person can afford, what a doctor will recommend for that person. Because keep in mind that if you are having surgeries, most surgeries, well, more so now, or at least up until a year ago, a lot more plans are covering some of the surgeries. But when I went through the process, all of the surgeries that I went through were not covered surgeries. They were considered cosmetic. and therefore not covered by my insurance. And the insurance had a specific exclusion for any surgeries related to transgender care. There's other costs that people incur. You saw me in one of the pictures running, and I think that was actually in Downingtown, if I remember correctly. It was a 4th of July race. It was hot as hell. But you saw me with a beard. Going on female hormones does not remove a beard. An electrologist does, at like $100 an hour for 3 years, every week, for 2 hours. So you can imagine, there's that cost. There's the cost of hormones. There's the cost of therapy. There are all kinds of costs that people incur, which I had the ability to pay for, that many, if not most, trans people don't have the ability to pay for. So when you see someone that doesn't look like they fit in right, or they're not quite as feminine as you think somebody should be, or maybe they don't pass real well, it's not necessarily their choice. This is who they are. They're just expressing themselves the same way that I'm expressing myself. They just don't have all the benefits, either from their community, their family, socioeconomically, whatever, that I have had. So again, that's one of the reasons why I say that my life has been blessed, because I have been able to do the things that I needed to do to make myself comfortable. And quite frankly, as a lawyer, to be able to fit into a situation where I walk into a room and everybody doesn't go, because obviously you lose clients that way. So you have to fit in, you have to blend in, you have to be just another lawyer in the room. And when I'm practicing law, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a trans woman. I'm a lawyer. I'm there to help a client. I'm there to litigate a case. And the fact that I might be a trans person has no bearing on anything. So again, keep in mind that the people who don't fit in, who don't blend in as well as I do, are just as much a trans person as I am and feel the exact same way that I did. The other thing that I'd like to talk briefly about before we start taking some questions is the concept of gender queer, gender non-binary. And I do that because I think you are going to start seeing more individuals in the workforce, in your law firms, clients, whatever, who identify as gender queer or gender non-binary. And I know that people still are trying to wrap their heads around somebody who's trans and get the terminology and get the lingo and get everything down right. And then somebody comes along and says, no, I'm gender non-binary. And everybody goes, okay, what's that mean? Help me out here. Gender non-binary, gender queer, is someone who doesn't identify their gender identity as male or female. They're somewhere on a spectrum. And sometimes they may feel more masculine, sometimes they may feel more feminine, sometimes they're just totally androgynous. But that is their gender identity. And I have a dear colleague and friend that I knew for years in their assigned sex. And about a year ago, they came out as gender non-binary. And you'll notice that I am referring to them as they, them, theirs, because those are their pronouns of choice, because they don't want to be associated with either gender. And when they first came out to me, I, like a lot of people, scratched my head and said, but I've known you this way. Are you sure you're not trans like me? And they were like, no, I'm not female, I'm not male, I'm non-binary. I don't fit. And it wasn't a political statement. It's not like I'm rebelling against sex stereotypes and no, I'm rejecting this role that society has given me. No, it was their gender identity, just like my gender identity has always been female. They never felt comfortable in terms of identifying with either gender identity and ultimately had a name for it, which is I'm genderqueer or I'm gender non-binary. And just as a footnote, hopefully in January of 2019, the law in New Jersey will go into effect. I'm hoping that the governor signs a bill this month that will allow citizens of New Jersey, people born in New Jersey, to change their birth certificate without having to go through surgery. In New Jersey right now, and I know in Pennsylvania, it's pretty sure it's the exact same way, that you need to go through gender confirming surgery to be able to change your birth certificate, in my case from an M to an F. In New Jersey, assuming the governor signs the bill, which we all presume he will, in January of 2019, because it doesn't take effect for 6 months, you will be able to get a birth certificate in New Jersey that says male, female, or non-binary. And so in New Jersey, it will be recognized to have the gender identity of non-binary as a legal status. So I know Pennsylvania is sometimes a little bit behind New Jersey in terms of the curve, shall we speak. Philadelphia, not so much. Philadelphia is usually pretty progressive in terms of their policies. So, that is something that be aware of. And again, I guess the thing that I'd like to leave you with that is that is their gender identity. That is who they are, just as much as mine has always been female. Theirs is non-binary. So I'd like to take questions. You didn't interject, so go ahead.
Did your parents have any idea? Because you hear about stories that when parents do have an idea, at puberty they start putting them on drugs. They talk to doctors about putting them on drugs,
Right.
which is supposed to make it easy.
So the question was, did my parents have any idea? Because you hear stories now about kids when the parents have some idea they can put their children on puberty blocking drugs to deal with it. No, my parents had no idea. Nobody had any idea. I mean, I fit in, I was a guy, and that's how I lived my life. My dad passed away in 1999, but my mom, who is 94 years old, Irish Catholic, still goes to church every day. Every day she drives to church. When I came out to my mom, let's just say my mom had a difficult time with it. Again, I was her son. I was her son, the lawyer. I gave her bragging rights amongst her friends. So my mom took it hard, but before I went up to Boston for some surgery, and that's when I was going, after the surgery, I was going to start living as Robin full time. My mom and I had dinner together, and as I was leaving, she said, I don't understand it, I don't like it, I don't want it, but you're my child, and I'll always love you. And she has, and we are, I think, closer now than we've ever been. I tell two stories about my mom. About 4 years ago, she had breast cancer, and of all the siblings, I'm the only one that lives in the state. My mom still is in New Jersey. So I was the one designated to drive back and forth to doctors, and the first time we went to the surgeons, we're checking in, and I'm hanging up her coat, and she's talking to the receptionist, and the receptionist goes, oh, that must be your daughter, she looks just like you. And my mother, without missing a beat, said, that's funny, I always thought she looked like her dad. And then, as Lynn said in my intro, last year I received an award from the ACLU of New Jersey. And of course I invited my mom, and she politely declined. She always jokes with me that she could never go to church with me because she thinks the walls would fall in. And she said if I went to an ACLU dinner, the walls would probably fall in. And she said to me, I don't know what's been harder for me to deal with, the fact that you're trans or the fact that you're a Democrat. So that's my mom. But no, no one had any idea. As I said, the only person that I ever told in my life before I went into therapy in 1980, for a short period of time, the concept that a trans woman could be attracted to a woman was not something that was prominent in psychiatry at that point in time, because women are attracted to men. So if you're a woman, you had to be attracted to men. Since I wasn't attracted to men, therefore I couldn't be, a trans woman. But anyway, the only person that ever knew my situation was my wife, until I went back into therapy in 2007. Just so that people know what she was referring to today. So for example, I have 4 clients who I have changed their name for when they were, 7, 9, 10, and 10. They're all, older now. And they are going on a drug called Lupron. And what Lupron does is it delays puberty. Because what the process is for somebody who's prepubescent is to go through the gender confirmation process as if you were assigned male at birth and you're going to live your life as a girl. You grow your hair, you wear dresses, you hang out with the girls. That's it. For a trans boy, you cut your hair, you wear jeans, you hang out with the guys. That's the only process until you close in on puberty. Then what you want to avoid for a trans child is them going through the puberty in accordance with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Because as you can imagine, for a trans boy to start menses, to start breast development, to have their hips start to develop, those things are very traumatic. Same with a trans girl. To start to grow a beard, the voice deepens, Adam's apple, hair on your body. Those are all very traumatic experiences for any trans person. So they put them on a drug called Lupron, and what that does is it delays puberty. It just kind of holds them in a prepubescent stage until the doctors, the therapists, the parents, everyone is satisfied that the child is truly transgender, and then they will go on the appropriate gender-conforming hormones. So if you were assigned male at birth, you would go on estrogen. If you were assigned female at birth, you would go on testosterone, and then you would go for, as close as you can to a normal puberty for the gender identity that you would identify with. Obviously, a trans girl is never going to get a period. A trans boy is not going to suddenly, grow male genitalia. But, a trans boy will develop a beard, voice will deepen, body hair. A trans girl, her breasts will develop, her hips will widen, will not develop an Adam's apple, voice will not change, will not grow a beard. So that's why they go on those drugs. Other questions, thoughts, issues, problems, questions, cards, letters? Yes, sir?
Did you have a chance to have a conversation with the 3 firms to stop referring your business?
The question was, did I have a chance to speak to the 3 firms that stopped referring me business? The answer is, in 2 out of 3, yes. In one, the individual, who was someone I knew fairly well, was like, I just don't believe in this. I can't send people to you because I think there's something wrong with you. And I can't send clients to somebody who I think there's something wrong with. In terms of the largest of the firms, the significant firm, they just said, oh, we decided to go in a different direction in terms of who we're sending work to. The famous, we're going in a different direction, and the third one I didn't even bother to speak to. And one thing that any therapist will tell a trans client, patient, is you never know how people are going to react. I lost basically all of my male friends when I went through this process. People that I thought would be with me through thick and thin my entire life never spoke to me again. And then there are other people that you go, oh, that's not going to go well. I don't know what's going to happen. And they just move on and they're fine. They're okay, whatever. So you don't know. Everybody reacts differently. One of my closest friends said, look, to me, what you've done is you've lied to me all these years. You lied about who you were. I was friends with that other person. You're not that person. I can't be friends with you. What can I say at that point other than doors open? If you ever come back, I'm here. Yeah.
First of all, I commend you for having the courage to bring your truth to light. I really do.
Thank you.
So my question is kind of broad, but coming from, as most of us are, a law firm environment, what can we do in terms of HR policy, or is there some place where you can tell us to go to sort of figure out how we deal with this on a personnel basis, recruitment, retention? You've given us a lot of information, and I'd like to know where you recommend that we all start.
So the question was, I'll leave out the courage part, thank you. The question was, what resources, what can we do in terms of HR, in terms of resources, in terms of retention, things of that nature. First of all, let me just comment on the courage. I don't consider myself courageous. I consider myself someone that had something that I was born with, and that the only way that we currently know how to deal with it was to do what I did. And so it was really a matter of survival, and I don't think that requires courage. It just requires the will to keep on living and to try to live the best life you can. But thank you. I appreciate that comment. In terms of HR policies and things of that nature, there are model workplace policies out there that you can find, and if you can't find them, I'd be happy to send them to you, through Lynn or through the organization. However, there are organizations such as GLAAD, G-L-A-A-D, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, NCLR, the National Center for Transgender Equality, NCTE. All of those organizations, ACLU, and Lambda Legal, LAMBA Legal, all of those organizations, you should be able to find either their policies or links to model workplace policies. And in terms of the law, so as I said, New Jersey tends to be very progressive. We have gender identity is a protected class in New Jersey under our law against discrimination. So you cannot fire a New Jersey worker because of their gender identity. Philadelphia, I know, also has a local ordinance dealing and protecting trans people. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania does not. Obviously, in terms of federal law, we are somewhat in a state of flux in terms of how the current administration treats trans people. But there are a number of federal cases interpreting Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they hold that Title VII prohibits discrimination based on sex stereotypes. So you can't not promote the woman because she's not feminine enough, or she doesn't dress appropriately, like a woman should. So that law has been in existence for a long time, and there have been a number of circuit courts that have interpreted Title VII to include gender identity as an impermissible sex stereotyping, and so therefore trans people in those cases have been protected under Title VII. It's far from clear. We don't have any Supreme Court directive at this point on it. I could give you a whole thing on how Title IX and Title VII work and everything else, but that would be another seminar. But for right now, the Third Circuit, which is where we are, has not ruled on it. But we're cautiously optimistic that the Third Circuit, if given a case under Title VII dealing with a trans individual, would find that, if they were fired because they were trans, it was impermissible sex stereotyping. But we don't have that case yet in our circuit, and we have no guidance from the Supreme Court. But again, if you are in a firm in Philadelphia, there is a Philadelphia ordinance that protects trans people in the workplace. So you can check that out through, I guess it's your Human Rights Commission or something like that. I apologize for not knowing the name precisely. But in terms of policies, check out those organizations. Google model policies. There are model workplace policies. And anything that bears the stamp of those organizations, they're all good ones. The other one is the Human Rights Campaign, HRC, is another organization that has model policies out there. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
I know the resistance I get if I change coffee creamers at work, okay, from the staff and the attorneys. How did you present this to the firm overall, just not your partners? And I have no idea if we have anyone within our organization that wants to make a transition like this. But if so, how do you introduce this?
So the question was, since I was the managing partner, how did I handle this in terms not just with my partners, but with the staff? And then if you have somebody in the workplace who's going to go through this, how do you handle that? So as I said, I came out to my partners almost a year and a half before I went through this process. I came out to the staff, the other attorneys in the staff, approximately 5 months beforehand. And at that point, we were, I guess, 18 lawyers and probably another 15 staff. And so what I did was as managing partner, I said there's going to be a firm-wide meeting. We really never had a firm-wide meeting before. And this was the beginning of 2009. The Great Recession was upon us. And so my timing was perfect because everybody came to the meeting thinking that we were closing the firm. And so my announcement that I was going through the gender confirmation process and that at some point I was coming back as Robin was like, whew, okay. We still have a job. Yes, you still have a job. So it actually worked out really well. And then what we did after that was we brought in a trainer to do diversity training and kind of go through a program to explain what it meant. Barbara Walters had done a 2020 special with a young woman by the name of Jazz Jennings. And they showed him that, and at the time, I guess Jazz was like probably 9 years old, and it was an amazing thing. And so we did that training, and as I said, I couldn't meet with clients until we had told the staff because I couldn't have it coming back through clients to the staff. So met with the staff, the attorneys, everybody, told them, and then did kind of like a client tour, hey, we have to have lunch, something I need to talk to you about. And met with all the clients that I was dealing with at that point in time. And then, as I said, that's when I started to come out to adversaries and to judges. And so in terms of how you handle it, should it come up in your workplace? Again, there's not a one-size-fits-all. So you, just like I told the woman over here, that you can go on and find model policies. You can find policies that will tell you how to deal with someone who's transitioning, and most often it's in those model policies. But I always say it really is something that needs to be individualized, depending on the person, depending on what they want, depending on what their role in the company or the firm is. And some people want the whole world to know that they're going through this. Other people want no one to know. So it really needs to be individualized. The bottom line is to try to treat the people or the person with respect, to try to facilitate it as much as you can, because again, I kind of went through the medical things that need to be done, but you need to change, your identity documents. So driver's license, in my case, a birth certificate, passport sometimes. Again, in my case, a law license, diplomas from various institutions. And so, that's a process, number one, that takes time. And in some cases, to do a legal name change, to change a birth certificate, it costs money. Not everybody can afford to do that. So again, if somebody comes in and says, I'm transitioning, I know you know me as John Smith, but on July 1, I'm going to be Mary Smith, and a firm says, well, give us your legal name change. And they said, well, I haven't done that yet. I can't do it, but I'm going to come in as Mary. Well, try to work with Mary. Try to accommodate Mary so that even though her legal identity documents have not caught up with her, you can issue, for example, an ID for the firm, or to get into the building, or an email address, so that they're not outed every time they walk into the building or send an email. And obviously certain things have to stay legal. You still have to file, their taxes under their legal name and things of that nature. But within a firm environment, you can make things easier, even if they're not necessarily the legal name of the person. So the question was, how do you deal with people in a workplace that may, from a political perspective, not necessarily agree with what you're doing? And how do you handle those employment situations? Which gets to one issue that always gets raised, and probably I passed over it and shouldn't have, which is bathrooms. Bathrooms are, I sometimes joke, the questions I get asked the most are bathrooms, bathrooms, and bathrooms. So more to deal with it broadly, again, it depends on where you are. So, for example, if you're in New Jersey where someone is protected by their gender identity under the statute, or you're in Philadelphia where they are protected in their gender identity, or if you want to take a very progressive view, if you're outside of Philly and say under Title VII it's a protected class, what you do is you treat the transgender person in the workplace as you would any other person in a protected class, and you deal with the person who has an objection to that the same way you would deal with any other person who had an objection to a person of a protected class. So for example, a clear example would be, an employee comes in and says, hey, that woman is wearing a hijab and is going to the ladies' room, and I don't feel safe because, we know, all Muslims are terrorists, and therefore I'm not safe in the ladies' room with her. Well, how would you handle that in the workplace? That's religious discrimination. And you'd say, listen, I'm sorry you feel that way. Number one, not all Muslims are terrorists, and that's part of her religious expression, and she's entitled to do that. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then you use a different bathroom. She's on the second floor, you go to the 9th floor. Use the single stall bathroom. Do something, but you don't force the person who's in the protected class to do something different. You try to, accommodate the person that has raised whatever, problem they have. Let them do something different. So it's the same with gender identity. Again, if you're in a locale where it is a protected class, you would handle it the exact same way. In terms of myself and how I handled things, I recognized that I was in a unique situation. I had worked at this firm for 20 years. I was the managing partner of the firm, and the female staff knew me as the male boss. So I understood that my situation was unique. So for the first 6 months after I came back as Robin, I used a single user bathroom. And that was my choice. It was something I did because I felt I needed to make the staff comfortable. Not so much because I was, yes, I was trans, but I was also the boss. And so I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable with someone invading their space. It was someplace where the staff could always go and, complain about the guys in the office, the managing partner, whatever, and I get it. And so I didn't want to be in that space for a lot of different reasons. So I did that. That is not the law. And that wasn't the law in New Jersey. I wasn't required to do it, but I did it because I wanted to make people feel comfortable. And after 6 months, quite frankly, I probably could have done it after 3 or 4. People became accustomed to who I was. They realized that, I looked different, I spoke a little differently. Perhaps I was a little bit more relaxed than I had been. But I was basically the same. I was the same lawyer, and they got used to me. And when I started using the ladies' room, there was absolutely nothing that happened. People always drag out the trope of, men in the ladies' rooms. There's in one of my presentations, I have a slide that's taken from Houston, Texas, because in 2015, Houston passed an ordinance called the Equal Rights Ordinance, which included protections for a wide group of people, just like Philadelphia's does, and it included gender identity. And there was a recall on that a year later, and the big way they attacked it was no men in the ladies' rooms. To which I reply, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. I don't want men in the ladies' rooms. What? I'm not a man. I mean, obviously I lived a good swath of my life as a man, but I'm not one now. And I wouldn't fit in a men's room. It would be rather awkward. And what I tell people is that New Jersey gender identity has been a protected class since 2007. As part of our statute, you are permitted to use public accommodations, which means bathrooms, locker rooms, in accordance with your gender identity. We are now 11 years since that statute went into effect, and there have been 0 cases of any trans people causing problems in the ladies' room. So, it's an issue that people come up with for political reasons. I can tell you that trans people use the bathroom for the same reason that all of you do. We have to go to the bathroom. And probably the most nervous person in the bathroom is the trans person. Be it a trans male or a trans woman, they want to get in, they want to do whatever they need to do, and they want to get out because they don't want problems. I mean, again, a trans person, a good day for a trans person is you blend in, nobody picks on you, nobody says anything to you, and you go on with your life and you live your life just like everybody else. And so using a public bathroom can be a very traumatic experience for some trans people. I won't name the organization because you could track her down, but there was a woman that I became friendly with, a trans woman, who was the head of an organization that dealt with LGBTQ issues. And we were at a public forum, we were going to the ladies' room, and she stopped when we got to the door. She had not had gender confirming surgery. Stopped when we got to the door. She said, do me a favor, go in and let me know if anybody's in there. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, please. I don't want any problems. So I went in, there was nobody there. Come on. But that's how nervous she was about using the ladies' room in public space because she didn't want any problems. So I hope that answered your question. Yeah. There are cases across the country in terms of where parents don't agree basically on a lot of different things involving trans kids, whether it's a legal name change, the treatment protocol. So there are cases, that deal with those issues. And it really comes down to where you are and where you're litigating those cases. So in New Jersey, I could tell you that if, let's assume for purposes of argument, mom and dad have split, trans child, mom wants to change the child's name to conform with their gender identity, dad is opposed to it, there will be a hearing, and the analysis is the best interest of the child analysis. So, it's an unfortunate situation where you have to go through a hearing to change someone's name because it should just be a ministerial act. But that is what happens if there's objections. There's a case out of, I believe it's Ohio, which is a terrible case involving a trans girl where dad objected to the medical treatment and the judge agreed with the dad and the child was denied medical treatment. So again, it kind of comes down to what jurisdiction you're in, what the law is in that jurisdiction, and the proofs that are presented, which becomes, you get into that, you're back to the socioeconomic factors that, if you can, if mom can call in a therapist and an endocrinologist and this person and that person to testify on their child's behalf, that may make a very compelling case. But, if you're an average middle-class family and you don't have access to those resources and you can't afford to bring those experts into court to testify, and dad is saying mom's crazy, look what she's doing to my son, etc. I mean, you get depending on what jurisdiction you're in, you can get a judge say, yeah, you're right. It's unfortunate, but there really is no, yes, this is what happens in those cases. It really comes down to what jurisdiction you're in and what the law is in that jurisdiction. So I apologize if I kept anyone late. I thank you so much again for inviting me, so much for being here. Thank you.